Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about technique, why it's so important, and the three types of techniques we should be doing every day, no matter what instrument you play, but mostly applied to piano. If you've heard the story, if you give a man 5 hours to chop down a tree, he should spend the first 4 sharpening his saw. It's kind of the same idea. When you're learning technique, you learn all kinds of stuff that's applicable to your pieces as you learn them. It's almost comparable to like grammar. So when we learn how to speak first, and then we're learning how to read and write, when we first learn as little kids, we sound everything out, like the word teacher, t, e, ch, er. But as we get better at reading, you start to see the sentences and the structures and the paragraphs and the ideas. Same thing with music. The more we study technique, so this is like our scales, arpeggios, and whatnot, you start to recognize those in music, and since you've already practiced it, you can apply it right away. So if you've ever heard the third movement Moonlight Sonata, this one. So as we're playing that, we're actually just playing 3 notes with every idea, even though it sounds like a lot. So that first idea is actually just a D flat minor chord, which is a D flat, F flat, A flat. And in this pattern, though, which we practice during our techniques, and then from there we go to, let's see, it's an A flat major chord, which is an A flat, C, E flat. And we do the same exact idea, but since we've already learned this, instead of seeing a bunch of different letters and different ideas, oh, this is one word and one expression right here. And then finally, we go to the D flat major chord, which is the D flat, F, A flat. And it's actually the dominant 7 chord with the B being in the bass, which is actually a C flat in this context. And then finally, we have an F sharp minor chord. Same 3 notes, F sharp, A, C sharp, and then finally we go to the C sharp fully diminished, which is the C sharp, E, G. And then to finish it off, we have a G flat major chord. So throughout that entire thing, that's the whole first idea of the piece, can be broken down into like 6 ideas. So just by reading the music and saying, these are my ideas, I've practiced my technique, I know what all those arpeggios look like, and I can do them right away. You just learn like 8 measures of music and the main theme of the piece like it was nothing because we've practiced our technique. So past like the theoretical understanding that technique gives us, it's also important, almost like an athlete trained. So if you're a baseball player, no matter where you're at, you need to be able to know how to throw the ball quickly and efficiently to the point where it gets where you want it to go, but you're also not hurting yourself. Same thing with piano. So we want our hand to be well trained, which is what we do in the technique time. So we want to have our hands where you can see there's 3 joints in our finger where each one is doing its job, and we're playing with our fingertips. What a lot of people do at first is they play with a flattened finger, which isn't always bad, but we want to utilize our finger as much as possible, not using the wrist unless we really want to for like the technique we're doing. So like as you can see, a good test of this, just put all 5 of your fingers into like any kind of position. So right now I'm just in a C position. All my hands are right, or all my fingers are right where they need to be in a really nice position. And as I go through, you should be able to activate each finger without moving another finger. 4 and 5 are really hard. Your ring finger and your pinky. You can see I got a little tense right there because I wasn't looking. And you can move everything. So this is a good test to see where your finger strength is at. Something my old teacher, Dr. Kim, would do is he would name out a chord like an E fully diminished 7. And we have to play it, put our hand in a good position, and then play each note without moving any of the other ones, which is pretty challenging when you first start. So now to talk about the 3 different types of techniques we should be practicing. One is to just build strength. So this could be like a 5-finger scale. I'll do it up here to make sure you can see it. Say I'm just on G, and this is something that works our steps and skips and the different relationships. So say like my pinky and my ring finger, and then something to work the skips. Those are called Ensley scales, and you should be able to do them in every single key. So like A flat. That's just one example. There's tons of 5-finger scales to practice. That's A flat, B flat, B major. And you should be able to go through every position. And what's cool is like in the D flat, it's really challenging to hit that F with your 3rd finger. And the goal with these is that you just get a nice, smooth sound. Maybe you can practice them in different ways, like quiet and staccato, or loud and smooth. So that's not just a warm-up, but we're also training our fingers. I always like to think of my fingers like a little snake, and it can pounce right where it needs to. The second type of technique we need to look at is scales. Lots of scales. We have major scales, minor scales. And for minor, you should really know what I just played was the natural minor. There's also the harmonic minor and the melodic minor. And you should be able to know each one of those in every single key. What's cool about that was scales. There was a piece I learned recently, and it's a Schubert piece, one of his impromptus. The entire first page is literally just an E-flat major scale. So if you know what an E-flat major scale is while you're reading the music, it's effortless because you can just see the direction. There's one exception in that whole first page where it does this like chromatic walk-up. I'll show you. E-flat major scale and chromatic walk-up. Back to the E major scale. So if I do that again, you just listen to the E major scale, chromatic walk-up. Just like that. And because I know all those techniques and what's going on there, I can quickly memorize that music and move on to new stuff. Other kind of scales you might want to try are the chromatic scale that we talked about. There's also the whole tone scale. And the third type of technique that we should be actively working on after just finger exercises and scales is any kind of arpeggio or skip-based exercise. This is when we really practice our chords and stuff. So this could be like just regular triad arpeggios, which is the same thing that we were just doing in the, which one was it? The Moonlight Sonata piece, the third movement. So this is an example in just doing C major arpeggios. You could do the same thing with like a D flat. So you should be able to move it all around the piano. Say you want to do a minor, let's just do G minor. Yeah, and so the more we do that, whenever you see it in a piece, you're ready to go right into it. Another good one to work on would be like 7th chord arpeggios. I'll do it up here because I know that it's easier to see. So say I did an exercise where I practiced all my every single type of 7th chord in arpeggios. There was my major 7th, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished, and fully diminished. And what's cool about learning stuff like that, the 7ths that I just mentioned, a piece I was teaching a student recently was the Moonlight Sonata first movement. And there's this section in it that has a ton of notes that just seem totally random. This part. But it's not random at all. It's actually just 2 chords. The first one is just an E flat diminished 7th chord, fully diminished. And if you just learn that pattern, you're good to go. And then the next one is a C fully diminished 7. And you just do each of those patterns. And then the next pattern it did was, I think, a C sharp fully diminished. And then the same thing, but this time on a B flat fully diminished. And then finally it went to the F sharp fully diminished. And then from there it went to the E flat fully diminished. Yeah, so just by learning these technical ideas, I just, in my mind, recreated like 8 measures of music just because I could remember the different patterns that was going on. Just like it's way more easy to memorize like sentences and ideas than it is to memorize all the different letters and then try and put them together later. So 2 really good resources to get started on if you want to start implementing technique would be finding something like a Hanon. So these exercises in here actually implement everything we just talked about. There's a collection of 5 finger exercises, and sometimes they'll work on different relationships. So like the relationship between 4 and 5, or your skips between like 1 and 3. And it does it in every single key. They also have scales, like what I'm looking at right here is all scale-based stuff. Really cool. And then if you want to niche down into something more specific, you can get something like the Jazz Piano Technique book, which you can see in here. Starting out, these are all 5-finger scales. Here's just regular half. Oh yeah, here we go. This is the octatonic scales where it's a combination of the chromatic and the whole step. Here's an example of like comping stuff. So you could be playing just chords in your left hand and then doing an actual exercise in the right hand. So say I'm practicing just a chord progression in the left hand with a pentatonic scale in the right hand. That would be one example. So find a good technique book if you're not sure where to start out. But ultimately, just starting out with arpeggios, major and minor scales would be your best bet. So technique is really our fundamental building block as musicians. As we build this technique, we're building our speed, we're building understanding of our instrument, and as we're learning music, we'll be able to learn stuff more quickly. And say you learn something in one piece that you use a technique for, you can apply that in the future to other pieces. So I hope I've encouraged you to really sit down and focus on learning your technique, because this is one of the most challenging things of being a musician. It feels like homework sometimes, like sitting down and doing your chores, but it is so fruitful in the end after you've spent a lot of time and you've built the fundamentals. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you feel inspired to go and try out some techniques for yourself. And let me know if you have any questions or anything, and I'll see you guys next time.